Okay, good evening, everybody. Please, my host, confirm you can hear me.
Good evening, Prof. I can hear you.
All right, thank you. I want to welcome us to SA Live class. We shall continue where we stopped the last time. So, in case you are just joining us, my name is Ayomi, and let me quickly use the next couple of minutes to recap on what we did in our last class. Okay, I'm actually trying to recollect. What did they do? Okay, I remember we have done IFRS 5, IS 36, we did IS 10, we did agriculture, IS 41, and we did IS 23, borrowing cost. If I can remember, right? Okay. Okay, so let me recap on which one? Okay, borrowing costs, right? Okay. We said borrowing costs are interest and other costs, an entity incurred in connection with borrowing of funds. Okay. So I remember we said before ISN 3, when you go to the bank and borrow money, okay, the interest element is normally expense. All right. So ISN 3 came on board, and it's now required that borrowing costs can be capitalized. And we said before we can capitalize borrowing costs, it has to be directly attributable to the construction, production, acquisition of a qualifying asset. Okay, so it has to be a qualifying asset. So what is qualifying assets? Qualifying assets are those assets that take substantial amount of time to get ready for intended use or sale. Okay. And we also go ahead to, or went ahead to look at the recognition criteria. That means, you know, the objective of IAS 23 is to regulate the amount of borrowing costs to be capitalized. That means you cannot really capitalize all the borrowing costs. That has to be the amount to be capitalized, right? It has to be certain amount that you can capitalize. Okay. So how do you now know? Okay. Now that's where we now looked at period of capitalization. All right. And we said three conditions must be met before you can commence capitalization of borrowing cost. Okay. Number one, expenditure for the asset is being incurred. Number two, borrowing cost is being incurred. And number three, all activities necessary to get the asset ready for intended use or sale have started. Now, if we're in a physical class, I would have asked you to be saying it after me. And I'm very sure that most of you just be saying, okay, maybe say it properly. But these are the things you need to know, right? Before you can solve questions. So it has to be in your head. And I also looked at suspension of capitalization. Suspension is different from cessation. Cessation is when you stop borrowing costs completely. Meanwhile, suspension is temporary. And you can only suspend if active development has been interrupted. Okay. For example, there is shortage of labor supply or there is shortage of material. Okay, that's when you suspend capitalization of borrowing costs. However, if the interruption to active development was necessary to get the asset ready for intended use of sale, borrowing costs will not be suspended. For example, after you are building a house, okay, or you are constructing a construction, as the case may be, okay, now and you now do something they call decking, okay, maybe you do some casting on that decking and you are waiting for it to solidify. Maybe you waited for 21 days or 1 month for it to be solidified. So in that case, the waiting time is ready, is necessary to get the asset ready for intended sale or use. Okay, in that case, you continue to capitalize borrowing costs. Okay, and the last one was cessation, and we say you can only cease borrowing costs when two things happen. For example, number one, substantially all activities necessary to get the asset ready for intended use are complete. Number two, construction work has been abandoned or suspended. You are no longer doing it again. So in that case, you now stop borrowing. Remember, when we say when you borrow money to construct an asset, okay, and you now immediately, because you don't need all the money immediately, you now reinvest. You are going to get what we call investment income. So in that case, as per IAS 23, the amount of borrowing cost to be capitalized, the actual amount incurred, okay, the actual amount of borrowing cost incurred capitalized. So that's what you need to know, and that's where we look at questions, to demonstrate that principle. And the last aspect of IAS 23 is general borrowing. In that case, you have some existing loans in your portfolio, and you needed to construct a qualifying asset. So all you need to do is to use those loans to construct a qualifying asset. So in that case, how do we now calculate our borrowing cost? Okay, so all you need to do is to apply what we call capitalization rate, where you look at the interest charges represent. So the figure you get, which is going to be in percentage, you now apply it on the cost of the asset. And you're going to watch out for the date. Maybe you need to prorate it as well. Because that figure, that percentage figure is for the whole year. Okay. So if the construction took the whole year, that means you don't need to prorate. If it took 6 months, you would say 6/12. If it took 9 months, you say 9/12. So the figure you get, you now add it back you're applying the cost on the percentage on the cost of the asset. So the figure you get, you still add it back to the cost of that asset for you to capitalize. And that was, I think, what we did the last time. Okay, as I told you, I'm going to quickly look at other aspects of the standard before I come back to your regular standard, and probably before we move into group accounting and cash flows. Okay, and as it were, because I realized that what we have covered in just 1 week was even more than what we would have covered if we are in the physical class. So this is quite fast, probably because there is no distraction. We just concentrated, and I've been speaking to my laptop for the next 2 hours. Okay, so except maybe I want to drink water. Okay, let me even drink water, sir, because during FR class I did not drink water. So you too, you can drink water. Okay. All right. So today we'll be looking at, what are we looking at? Yeah? Let me check. I'm not sure. Let's prepare the material. Okay. Okay. In case you are just joining us. Okay. Oh, right. We'll be looking at IS 21. Wow, that's interesting. Event. The effect of changes in foreign exchange rate, and if time permits us, we check out substance over form principle. All right, that's fine. All right. So in case you are just joining us, these are the rules. Okay, you are expected to be muted on both audio and video, so to avoid background distractions and noises. Okay, and in case you have issues, technical difficulty, you cannot re-log in. Quickly call the helpline. Okay. I'm just going through this in case you are just joining. I know some people are just joining us for the first time. Now, in case you have any issues, please, you're expected to be cordial, all right, and professional. And I want to also advise that you listen to me, listen to what I'm saying, okay? Because I said you have a video at the end of the program, you may not be able to get what I'm saying. But at the same time, if you have some points that you need to jot down, that's fine, all right? Okay, so I'm going to attend to all your questions at the end of the class. Okay, so I'll be watching my time rigorously here. So you can use the chat button. You'll see it right from your hand to ask your questions. And feel free to talk to any of the lecturers or your lecturer of the course you are taking at any time, even after the normal lecture time. Okay, so you can call us. All right, so that's fine. So let's start. IAS 21. That's a very simple standard. Okay, very simple. So I'm going to take it through in the next, if I want to, because I'm teaching, maybe I'll spend 1 hour thereabout. But if I want to really summarize it in the next 20 minutes, we are done with the standard. Okay, so I'm just going to break it down. All you need to know is the principle. Once you understand the principle, then you are fine. IAS 21, the effect of changes in foreign exchange rate. Now listen to me. Listen. If your company either sells or buys in foreign currency, IAS 21 will apply. Okay? Let me say that again. If your company either buys or sells in a currency other than Nigerian naira, if your company is in Nigeria, okay, IAS 21 will apply. But if your company, now after we go through IAS 21 today, most likely you are very, wow, this standard is very simple, and you just know it all of a sudden, and tomorrow morning when you get to work, or next tomorrow when you resume work, you now went to check your financial statement, and now realize that they didn't apply IAS 21. Okay, so why? Probably all your transactions are dominated or are done in the local currency. That means you have never bought or sold in the foreign currency, in foreign currency. That's the meaning, right? Okay, so when we get to IFRS 2, share-based payment, I will also say the same thing. Because after knowing share-based payments, you now go and check financial statement and now say, they did not apply share-based payment. Why? So I'll tell you why. Now, in that case, probably you did not pay any transactions in shares, or your payments are not linked to the share price of your company, okay, or the company you are reviewing. That's why they did not apply IFRS 2. So the same thing with IAS 21. Once you are dealing in a currency, maybe you are buying or you are selling in a currency other than Nigerian currency, okay, we are in Nigeria, okay, I'm not really too sure that somebody is watching us from the UK, but as far as I'm concerned, I think all of us are in Nigeria, or maybe you're in the UK. You didn't want to tell us. Okay, that's fine. So you might be in the UK. So let me just try and carry everybody along. So let me just say, in as much that your entity is dealing with a currency other than your national currency. Maybe in the UK, that's UK pounds. In the US, that's the United States dollars. In Nigeria, that's Nigerian naira. In Ghana, that's cedis. In Japan, that's Japanese yen. Okay, once you deal with transaction other than that national currency, then IS 21 will apply. And this is all you need to know. IS 21 applies to three things. Number one, the definition of functional and presentation currency. Okay, that's what IS 21 deals with. The definition of functional and presentation currency. Okay, and number two, accounting for individual transactions in foreign currency. Okay, how do you know? I said earlier that once you engage in business activity other than your national currency, okay, IS 21 will apply. So that's why how do you now account for individual transactions in foreign currency, okay? And number three, translating the financial statement of a foreign operation. That's key. Translating the financial statement of a foreign operation. And in your group accounting, that's where you are going to see that, okay? Translating the financial statement of a foreign operation. So when we do our group accounting, that is foreign subsidiary. We are going to see IS 21 again. So it's very good for us that we understand the standard itself before we now go, into group accounting, okay? So that when we get to those levels, we'll just be flowing. Why? Because we already have a very good foundation. So if you wake up tomorrow morning, you should be able to remember that IS 21 applies to three things. Number one, the definition of functional and presentation currencies. Number two, accounting for individual transaction in a foreign currency. And number three, translating the financial statement of a foreign operation. But we are not going to look at number three today. We are going to look at the first two that deals with the definition of functional and presentation currency and how to account for individual transactions in foreign currency. No baton, and that's the end of IS 21. The next time we're going to look at it is when we are dealing with foreign subsidiary. Okay, all right. So let's move ahead. Now, number one, what is functional currency? Okay, according to IS 21, the functional currency is the primary economic environment, okay, the currency of the primary economic environment in which an entity operates, okay, the currency of the primary economic environment in which an entity operates. So if my company operates in Nigeria, it is assumed that my functional currency is Naira. If my country or my company operates in the UK, it is assumed that my functional currency is the UK pound. If my company operates in Germany, it is also assumed that my primary economic, the currency of the primary economic environment in Germany is the euro. All right, euro. Okay, now, so that is functional currency. Okay, I'm still coming back to that because sometimes it might be difficult to differentiate between functional currency and presentation currency. Okay, so what are the primary factors that we need to look out for in determining our functional currency? I am coming back there. Now, this is very important. If you check May 2017 ICANN exam, May 2017 ICANN exam, I wrote that paper. Okay, the first question was this. The examiner was asking us to advise that company, okay, how they can determine their functional currency. And the B part of that question was the calculation of a foreign subsidiary. That is why in corporate reporting, you cannot joke with the theoretical aspect. It's very key, okay? So it's not always on calculation. And that time, I think the compulsory question was 30 marks. So that first question was 5 marks, and the calculation was 25 marks. So I just go ahead and tell the examiner, these are the primary conditions or the primary factors that you can consider. Even the secondary factor, I have my 5 marks. I went to the, what's it called? The foreign subsidiary. You just do it, and it's balanced. And that's how you move on. Okay, why? Because you understood the principle. Now, what is presentation currency? The currency in which financial statements are prepared. What it means is this. If I have a company in Nigeria, okay, the functional currency is Naira. If I also present my financial statement in Naira, automatically both my functional currency and my presentation currency, they are the same, okay? That means they are the same. But if I have a foreign operation, I control another company in the US dollar, okay? Now, when they prepare their accounts, they are going to use the currency of the primary environment, which is the US dollar. By the time I'm consolidating, I needed to convert into my own functional currency. So it now becomes my presentation currency, okay? So the currency in which financial statements are presented, that's what I mean by presentation currency. So if the examiner is going to ask you, he can ask you differentiate between functional currency and presentation currency. So all you need to tell the examiner is that the functional currency are the currency of the primary economic environment in which an entity operates. Meanwhile, the presentation currency is the currency in which financial statements are presented. Now, what is exchange difference? I don't really think the examiner can bother you with this, okay? Obviously, your exchange difference is the difference resulting from translating a given number of units of one currency into another currency at different exchange rate, okay? Or at the beginning of the month, you went to the bank to exchange $5,000 into Naira. At that time, dollar to Naira was 360, okay? When you go back there at the end of the month, okay, dollar to Naira is now maybe 375. That is the exchange difference. So that's why they say the difference that results from translating a given number of units of one currency into another currency at different exchange rates. So that's what I mean by exchange different. And of course, your foreign operation is a subsidiary or associate or joint venture or branch whose activities are based in the country or currency other than the reporting entity. So that's a foreign operation. So we're going to look at that when we go to foreign, subsidiary under group accounting. Now, we said earlier that functional currency is the currency of the primary economic environment where the entity operates. Now, IS 21, now listen, now says that an entity should consider the following primary factor. This is what I was saying the other time. When determining functional currency, like I said, sometimes in practice, it might be difficult to differentiate between functional currency and presentation currency, okay? We're going to see an example in a question format, okay? And you see that it's quite difficult. So in that case, the IS 21 now says what's it called? An entity should consider three primary factors, okay, to determine whether a currency is a functional currency. Number one, the currency that mainly influences sales price for goods and services, okay? It's very simple, right? Just remember that the currency that mainly influences sales price, you have to put this in your head. These are the things that the examiner will ask, okay, in case they want to test IS 21, okay? The currency that mainly influences sales of price for goods and services. This is very key. So you are going to look at that. Number two, the currency of the country whose competitive factors and regulations mainly determine sales price for goods and services. And the last one, the currency that mainly influences labor, material, and other costs of providing goods and services, okay? So the currency that mainly influences the sales price of goods and services, the currency that whose competitive factors or forces, regulations mainly determine the sales price of goods and services, and the currency that mainly influences labor, material, or other costs of providing goods and services. Now, if the primary factors are not inconclusive, that means when we did the look at the primary factors, we are still having issues between Nigerian Naira and the US dollar. We didn't know the one that's a functional currency. IS 21 now says you should consider the following factors. The currency in which funds from financing activities are generated, okay? The currency in which funds from financing activities are generated, and the currency, okay, in which receipts from operating activities are retained, okay? The currency in which receipts from operating activities are retained. So you have to consider those two things: currency in which funds from financing activities are generated, and currency in which received from operating activities are retained. So those are the two things you need to look out for when determining. So by then, it will be clearer which one is a functional currency, and the other one will be the most likely the presentational currency. Okay, all right, and you can now take note of this. Okay, there are times that when a foreign subsidiary, rather than applying the above rules, should simply use the same functional currency as that of the parent. Okay, so sometimes, yeah, if companies or entities do not want to go through the primary factor and the secondary factor, they can just go ahead, that's a foreign subsidiary, and use the functional currency of its parent. So in doing that, IAS 21 says the following factors should be considered: whether the foreign operation operate as an extension of the parent rather than having significant autonomy. Okay, so if the what's it called, the foreign operation actually have a significant autonomy, okay, or they operate as an extension of the parent. If they have a significant autonomy, they cannot. That's the meaning. They have to consider the primary and the secondary factor. But if they operate as an extension of the parent company, just an extension, maybe it's just a warehouse that is there, okay? But once they have their autonomy, what does that mean? That means they have their finance department, they have their procurement department, they have their own accounting software. That means they have autonomy. They can spend money, they can receive money, they can prepare financial statements. So in that case, they need to go through those rules. So you need to determine whether that foreign operation is an extension of the parent company, or rather than having a signal autonomy. Then the level of transaction with the parent is immaterial. So you have to consider that. Whether cash flow are readily available for remittance to its parent, okay? Whether they readily remit to the parent. So in that case, they might not, they might not consider all those factors. Now, whether foreign operation has sufficient cash flows to service its debt without needing funds from the parent, okay, that is very key. That means they are they have autonomy. That's the meaning, right? Okay, so in that case, they need to consider all those factors. But otherwise, they might just use the functional currency of the parent. Okay, and presentation currency is defined by IAS 21 as the currency in which the entity presents its financial statement, as we have said earlier. Okay, now everybody is laughing, or maybe you are laughing for me, or laughing on me, or laughing under me, or whatever. Okay, but let's find out whether we can apply what we have just learned in a question. I like us learning a principle, solve questions, learning another principle, solve questions. Okay, that's how we grow into a bigger and complex question. Once you see bigger and complex question, you don't need to run away. All you need to do is to break it down and attack it. Okay, so let's find out whether we can solve this question. Now, Chief is an entity located in a country whose currency is the dollars. Okay, now 70% of Chief sales are dominated in dollars, and 30% of them are dominated in sterling. Okay, now pound sterling. All right, now Chief does not convert receipts from customers into other currency. Chief buys most of its inventories and pays for a large proportion of operating costs in sterling. Chief has 2 bank loans outstanding. Both are denominated in dollars. Required. What is the functional currency of Chief? Okay, I have this question in my front. So how will I know? Now, the examiner already told me here that Chief entity is located where? In a country whose currency is in dollars. So most likely, this is the United States of America. And we already said earlier that the functional currency is the currency of the primary economic environment in which a country or a company is located. Okay, so we can easily assume that the currency or the functional currency of Chief is dollars. But no, we need to find out again, because IAS 21 has already told us that 3 economic factors must be considered. Number 1, the currency that mainly influences sale of goods and services. So we need to find out. And we're told that 70% of Chief sales are dominated in dollars. This is also telling us that most likely the dollar is a functional currency. But we move on again to try to solidify that. 30% of them are dominated in where? In pound sterling. So obviously there is a conflict. Okay. Now, so that means we functional currency. So that means dollars or pound sterling might not really, the primary factor was inconclusive. So we can't conclude using the primary factor to say that dollar or sterling is the functional currency. Chief does not convert receipts from customers into other currency. Okay, that's fine. Now, Chief buys most of its inventory and pay large proportion operating costs in sterling. Okay, now this one is also telling us that most likely sterling might be the functional currency. Why? most of it is inventory. Don't forget, the currency that mainly influences what's it called? Labor, okay? Another cost of producing services. We are also seeing sterling here. So the primary factor are not conclusive. Then I move ahead again. Then I will now consider my secondary factor. What is the two currency factor? The currency in which cash from financing activities are generated, or receipt from operating activities are retained. Okay, so that's what I'm applying. I will now come back here again. You now say Chief has 2 bank loans outstanding. Both of these are denominated in dollars. Obviously, dollar is the functional currency. Okay, so we can look at that in the answer. Okay, so you can see that. So just explain to the examiner. Okay, let's go through it together. Okay, first, the primary indicator is functional currency should be applied. So most of Chief sales are denominated in dollars, and so we suggest the functional currency. However, since a lot of cost of business are denominated in sterling, can you see that now? Okay, so you can also say it's sterling. Okay, then receipts are retained in both dollars and sterling. However, funding is generated from dollars loans. Can you see that? Which further suggests that dollar. So all things considered, is saying that the functional currency of Chief is dollar. So that's it. So that's how you apply it. Okay. So that's the way you analyze for the examiner. You don't just tell the examiner that the functional currency is dollar, because if you look at the question is saying what is the functional currency of Chief. Even if you know it, don't just say dollars. So you have to analyze it. Okay, just like the way I have done, even without looking at those answers. So that's where you go. So that's first thing that IAS 21 deals with. Don't forget the definition of functional and presentation currency. So successfully, we have dealt with the first thing or the first item under IAS 21. Now you have to be with me here. If you have not been listening to me, okay, maybe you are doing something else. You just put me on loudspeaker. Now you need to be with me now, because this area is very important. How do we account for individual transaction dominated in foreign currency? You know, I've told you that once your entity buys or sells in foreign currency, IAS 21 will apply. So the question is, the only thing we are doing under IAS 21 is conversion. Okay, we are only converting from one currency to the other. So the question is, at what exchange rate do we convert? And anytime we are converting, there's always what we call exchange difference. And how do we treat the exchange difference? That's everything we are looking out for under IAS 21. And you need to be with me here. Okay, now listen to me. As per IAS 21, anytime you enter into a transaction dominated into dominated in a currency other than, again, the transaction dominated in the currency other than the functional currency, that transaction, now listen, must be translated into a functional currency before it is recorded. Okay, let me say that again. Anytime you engage in transaction other than your national currency or your functional currency, that transaction must be translated before it is recorded. So what it means is this: on 1st July 20x9, okay, I bought goods from a UK supplier. UK will most likely invoice me in the UK pounds. So when I receive the goods, before I can record it, I must translate. Translation means convert. So I have to convert into my Naira currency. So what exchange rate will I use when I'm converting that transaction initially? As per IAS 21, I will use the spot rate on the date the transaction occurred. Okay, that's it. That's what you have here. Okay. So you need to know this, because when we solve questions, this is the principle we are going to apply. So when the transaction occur, on the day the transaction occur, I will use the spot exchange rate. Okay, that means I will use the spot rate on that date to convert the transaction. Okay, I might also use what's it called? The average rate over a period of time, provided the exchange rate has not fluctuated significantly. But I can assure you, or I can tell you, that average rate will always work for interest. For example, you borrow loan in dollars, okay, and you also need to pay, okay, in dollars, right? Now, when you borrow that loan in dollars and the interest element, because it's over time, so it's advisable to use the average rate, okay? But most questions that you're going to see other than loans, they are actually using the spot rate. So initially, you record the transactions using the spot rate or you use the average rate. Okay, that is when the transaction occur, the date the transaction occur. Okay, so let's move on. On cash settlement, okay, when cash settlement occurs, such as you receive cash from an overseas credit customer, okay, now that settled amount must be translated into the functional currency using the spot rate. Now listen to me, okay. For example, you sold on credit, okay, you sold on credit. So when you sold on credit, the what's it called now, when you sold on credit, let's say you are a Nigerian company. When you sold to an overseas supplier on credit, okay, you are going to probably invoice them in naira. Okay, now at that date of transaction, when you sold, right, you invoice in naira. Now when they now pay, most likely they are going to pay in dollars, okay, because it's a US firm. So what do you need to do? You need to convert that payment in dollars into naira using the exchange, the spot exchange rate, okay, using the spot exchange rate on the settlement date. So in the question, you will see the day the transaction occur, okay. You also see the exchange rate on the settlement date, okay. Now, if the amount differs from that what is used when the transaction occur, okay, that would be what we call exchange difference, okay. How do you now treat exchange difference? It's either you have gain or loss, okay. So exchange difference on settlement is treated as in the profit or loss account, okay. So when you have IAS 21 requires that transactions are recognized in the profit or loss account, okay. So you are going to recognize it in the profit or loss account when they arise. So IAS 21 did not really tell us when in profit or loss should we put exchange gain or loss, okay. It didn't really tell us, but obviously it's going to be within appropriate heading. For example, maybe operating expenses or operating income. For example, if it is exchange gain, you take it into operating income. If it is exchange loss, you might take it to operating expenses, okay. So you can have that in your what's it called now, in your accounting policy, okay. So that is that. All right, so what you need to know is transactions should be initially recorded using the spot rate or maybe the average rate, as the case may be. And on cash settlement, you also have to retranslate again using the spot rate, okay, spot exchange rate, and that will now lead to what we call exchange difference. And exchange difference, which could be gain or loss, are treated in the profit or loss account. So let's now look at this illustration. I know the major challenge for students when it comes to IAS 21 is when do I divide or when do I multiply, okay. I'm going to try to explain that to you within my own knowledge and understanding. Maybe it will work for you. You may have your own way to know when to divide or when to multiply. That's fine. The most important thing is make sure you get it correctly. But I'm going to tell you the way that I think would be helpful to you or for you, all right, when you need to multiply or when you need to divide when it comes to IAS 21. But let's look at this illustration. On 7th May 20x6, an entity with a functional currency of dollars so goes to a German entity for 48 euro. I think that's euro, right? Okay. On this date, the rate of exchange was $1 to 3.2 euro. Now listen. Notice an illustration. Don't look at the solution. I think the solution is there. Don't look at it. So let's try and solve that together. Don't forget, as per IAS 21, on the date the transaction occur, I must convert it into my functional currency, okay, using the spot exchange rate. So I enter into a transaction with the functional currency of $1. Okay, an entity with the functional currency of $1 so goes to a German for this amount. Okay, so on this date, this is the exchange rate. Okay, now how do I know? Because I sold to a German company, so I have to invoice them in euro. Okay, so when I sold to them, even though they have not really paid, so before I record that transaction as what's it called now, receivables, because I'm selling to them on credit. So before I record that transaction, I have to convert it to my functional currency, which is my dollars. So when I look at the exchange rate, can you see now $1 to 3.2 euro? What it means is dollar is stronger than the euro. Okay, that's why we have $1. Anytime, this is not SFM. When it comes to SFM, they will tell you direct quotes and indirect quotes. Okay, we are not doing SFM when it comes to your edging. Okay, but this is IS21. Okay, so forget about direct or indirect quote. Sometimes the $1 can be on where the euro 3.2 euro is. Okay, don't be carried away. All you need to know is anytime you see $1 to or 1 naira to any other currency, higher than that. So that means it's telling you that dollar is stronger. Okay, so anytime or any currency they put one, that means it's stronger. It's the stronger currency. Now I will now look at the question: in which currency out of this exchange rate that was quoted here was the transaction quoted? It was quoted in euro. That means it was quoted in the weaker currency. Okay, so if $1 equals to 3.2 euro and the transaction was quoted in the weaker currency, and I need to convert to the stronger currency, which is the dollar, that means I will divide. Can I say that again? Okay, now let me say that again. Now I will look at the exchange rate: $1 to 3.2 euros. Okay, so that means dollar is stronger. I will now look at the currency in which the transaction was quoted, which is 48 euros, 48,000 euro. Is zero now, Abi? That's German, yeah. Now 48,000 euro. All right. So now, and I need to convert to my functional currency because I'm the one selling to them. Okay, so since my currency is stronger than that foreign currency, and the foreign the weaker currency was dominated with that transaction, so I will divide. So when you now come here, so when I'm now converting that transaction on the date it occurred, what will I say? I will now say I will now say $48,000 48,000 euro divided by 3.2 euro. The answer is to give me 15,000. So that would be my dollars. Okay, to give me $15,000. I will now say debit receivables and credit revenue. That is the date of the transaction. Why? What have I done? I have converted it using the spot exchange rate. Okay, I will now continue. Is there any cash settlement? Don't forget, when there is cash settlement, you still need to reconvert again using the spot exchange rate. That is the principle. On 28 July 2026, the customer paid outstanding balance. Okay, they said they paid outstanding balance. Did they pay before? Why are they using outstanding balance? Let me check. Okay, they didn't pay. Okay, that means they paid everything. Okay, so the customer paid everything. Don't forget, we already recorded this transaction. Okay, so that same year, the customer now paid. Okay, we know we entered into the transaction in May and we recorded revenue of $15,000. Okay, now the same customer now paid in July, 20th July 2026. The exchange rate at this time is now $1 to 3.17. So what will I do again? I will take back that $48,000 initially. Okay, I will also divide. So when I divide, I have $15,142. What does that supposed to mean? Now listen to me. Is it a gain or a loss? Okay, let me come back here so that you will understand. Okay, what it means is this. I have a receivable. Receivable is money that I'm expecting that is coming to me from my creditor. I was expecting $15,000, okay, because the exchange rate as at that time was $1 to 3.2. But now, when my foreign customer now paid me, the exchange rate is now $1 to 3.17 euros. So when I do the conversion, I have 15,142. So if I was expecting 15,000 naira, but on conversion, I now have 15,142. What does that mean? If I was expecting $15,000, I now have 15,142. What does that mean? It is a gain to me. Okay, so I'll now say debit cash with that amount because they have paid me. So I'll now go to my receivables. Don't forget, I've already debited my receivables with $15,000. I will now credit it to nil it up. Then the difference, which is the 142, I will now recognize it as exchange gain in the profit or loss account. So I will now credit it as exchange gain. Don't forget, we said exchange difference are treated in the profit or loss account as either exchange gain or exchange loss. But in this case, it is an exchange gain. Okay, so that's why you see it in the P or L account. Okay, so that's the first illustration. It's very simple, right? IS21 is actually very simple, very, very simple. But sometimes when students hear IS21, which one is this one again? No, okay, it's quite simple, very simple, right? Okay, now there's something we now call treatment of year-end balances. Okay, what do you mean by year-end balances? You know the illustration we just looked into now. Transaction occurred in May. Okay, we recorded the transaction. Then when cash was paid in July, it's still within the year. Then we recorded the transaction again. You know, we now treated the transaction the way it's supposed to be. Okay, that transaction is closed now. But let's assume that transaction occur in the same May, but the transaction was not settled up to the year end. Okay, that means the foreign customer was still owing us. How do we now treat it? That's what we call treatment of year-end balances. But before you can understand this, two things must come to your mind. Now, listen to me. Listen to me carefully. Because somebody will be asking, how do you treat revaluation arising from foreign exchange difference? Is it not going to other comprehensive income? This is where you're going to see it now. So you need to listen. So be with me here. Okay? So when we talk about treatment of year-end balances, two things will come to your mind. Number one, you have to determine, is the item a monetary item? Okay, is the transaction a monetary item or a non-monetary item? These are examples of monetary items. For example, cash, payables, receivables, loans. Those are examples of monetary items. When you talk about monetary item, money, cash is money. Payables, you are expecting cash. Or you are paying cash rather. What's it called? Receivables, you are expecting cash. Loans, cash. Okay, so those are monetary item. Okay, now when you have a monetary item, what does that supposed to mean? At the year end, you must retranslate using the closing exchange rate. Now listen to me carefully. At the year end, you must what? You must retranslate. If it is a monetary item, that means it is cash, it is payables, it is receivables, or it is loan. So look at the example we did the other time. Let's assume that when we enter into a transaction with a German supplier or with a German customer on May 20, 2019, as the case may be, and the German supplier did not pay us, okay, at the end of the year, okay, that money that we are receiving is a receivable, okay, so it is a monetary item. So at the end of the year, when I'm preparing my balance sheet, I must retranslate it, okay, using the closing exchange rate or the year-end exchange rate. Now, let's now go to non-monetary items. Non-monetary items, they are current assets, or sorry, they are non-current assets, they are inventory or investment. Okay, those are the non-monetary items. That's where you now see land that is coming up. Now, whenever you are dealing with non-monetary items, you will not retranslate. Can I say that again? Don't retranslate. For example, you bought a land in Cedis in June 2020. Okay, you bought a land in Cedis in June 2020. So when you bought that land, on the day the transaction occur, you are going to use the spot exchange rate. Okay, but you have not paid. Okay, so since you have not paid, okay, for the land, okay, at the year end, you now consider it as a non-monetary item because land is within non-current asset. Okay, that is maybe if cost model is used. Okay, now you will not translate. Okay, however, now listen, however, if the item is carried at fair value, now listen, you have to be with me here because we have already said or we have already agreed that as per S21, you don't retranslate non-monetary item at the year end. When you are preparing your account, that means you just, carry that figure right from the date of the transaction. Okay, but if it's an item that is carried at fair value, the fair value should be translated at the date it was determined. Okay, so this is what you need to know. That fair value, you need to retranslate it using the fair value at the date it was determined. Okay, so if fair value model is being used, but if you use cost model, obviously you are not going to retranslate, or if it is an inventory or if it is an investment. But once it's a non-current asset and use the cost model, you will not retranslate. But once you use fair value model, you are going to retranslate at the date the fair value was determined. So anytime you hear about year-end balances, what comes to your mind? Monetary item and non-monetary item. For a monetary item, which is your cash, payables, receivables, and loan, you have to retranslate using the closing exchange rate. But for a non-monetary item, which is your non-current asset, inventory, or investment, you do not retranslate. However, if the item is carried at fair value, you have to retranslate, okay, using the fair value at the date it was determined. Okay, all right. So that's what you do there. Now, there is now exchange difference on the translation of monetary item. We have said it earlier. So whenever there is an exchange difference, you have to recognize it in the profit or loss account, whether as an operating income, if it's an exchange gain, or as an operating expenses, if it's an exchange loss. Okay. Now let's now look at this example. Okay, let's look at this example. Okay, monetary item on 7th May 2026. Just the same question or the illustration that we looked at the other time. Okay, on 7th May 2026, an entity with a functional currency of dollars sold goods to a German entity for 48,000 euros. On this date, the rate of exchange is this. So when you see question like this, don't worry yourself. Just start on initial recognition. On initial measurement or recognition or whatever. I-21 state that that transaction must be translated into the functional currency using the spot exchange rate. So I will ask myself, what is my functional currency? It is the dollar. Now, out of this exchange rate, which one is the weaker and which one is the stronger? My dollar is the strongest because it is quoted in $1 to 3.2 euros. And I will ask again, in which currency the transaction occur? It occurred on the weaker currency, and I needed to convert or to translate into the stronger currency. So in that case, I need to divide. So when I divide, it will now be 48,000 euros divided by 3.2 euros. So it will give me 15,000. So on the date of the transaction, I will record a receivable of 15,000 and I'll credit my revenue with 15,000. Then I go again by the reporting date, probably because the invoice has not been settled. Okay, so my reporting date is 31st July 2026. The invoice has not been settled. On this date, this is the exchange rate. Then I will ask myself, because sometimes the examiner might decide to even give you exchange rates that are not relevant. So I need to ask myself, since it has not been settled, so year-end balance is calling me. Okay, year-end balance is calling me. And I will ask myself, what is my year-end balance? It is two things, monetary item and non-monetary item. What do I have under my monetary item? I have cash, I have payables, I have receivables, and I have loan. Now, what is in front of me? Receivables is in front of me. Okay, so that means this is my non-monetary item under my year-end balance. Okay, what is the principle? Or how will I treat a non-monetary item? I'm already told that for a non-monetary item, I must retranslate. Okay, so I will now go ahead because I will now tell the examiner that receivables are monetary items, so they must be retranslated into the entity's foreign currency or functional currency. So I will now retranslate at 3.4. I will now divide my initial 48,000 with this 3.4. So if I divide it, what will I get? I will get 118,000. Okay, 118,000. So when I get that figure, I will ask myself again, is it a gain or a loss? If when the transaction occurred, I was expecting 15,000, but at the year end, the transaction now worth 14,118. That is a loss. Okay, I will recognize it immediately in my profit or loss account. That means I will simply reduce my receivables. Okay, I'll have to credit my receivables with the 882. That's the difference between the initial 15,000 and the what at the year end, which is I will simply reduce my receivables and I will debit my profit or loss account. It's as simple as that. But don't forget, if the cash has been settled during the year, you don't need to do all of this like the previous illustration that we checked the other time. Okay, so that's that. I move on again. So let's look at some examples under the non-monetary item. What is my non-monetary item? My non-current assets. Can you remember? My inventory and my what? My investment. Okay, and under non-monetary item, what do? You don't retranslate at the year-end balance. However, if the item is carried at fair value, you have to what? You have to retranslate. So Olympic, which has a functional and presentation currency in dollars, account for land using cost model in IS 16. Okay, on 1st July 20x5, Olympic purchased a plot of land in another country for 1.2 million dinars. Relevant exchange rate as this. Can you see now? The examiner gave us the exchange rate. They quoted, can you see? They quoted, look at the way they quoted it here. They said dinars, okay, to $1, okay? And I asked myself, Olympic, what is your foreign currency? It is what? In dollars, okay? And my dollar for Olympic is stronger, is the strongest currency. And I will ask myself again, what currency is transaction denominated? It's denominated in 1.2 million dinars. That means this is the weaker currency. And they gave me the exchange rate as at 1st July. When I enter into the transaction, they also gave me the exchange rate as at 30th June 2026. That is the year-end balance. Okay, so when the transaction occur, what will I do? I will simply say, how much is the money? 1.2 million divided by 4.0. I will have a figure. So because it's the land, so what will I do now? I will have to debit my what's it called now? Is it PPE now? Okay, you debit your PPE, Abby, and because we have not paid, I'll now credit my payables. Okay, so what will I do? So okay, look at it now. The land is initially recognized at cost, and this should be translated into functional currency. So the land is initially recorded at $300,000. Can you see now? 1.2 dinars. So land is not a monetary item, so it's not retranslated in accordance with our system, and no depreciation is charged. So that means the land remains what? At 300,000 at the year end. Okay, so because land is a non-monetary item, you don't retranslate. So it simply means that this exchange rate of 30th June 2026 is irrelevant. Why? Because land is carried, this, as per this question is concerned, land is carried at cost. And since the non-monetary item, you don't retranslate, so you continue to carry it at 300,000, okay, dollars. All right, so that's that. Now, let's now look at the situation. Okay, somebody can ask me a question. Why am I not charging depreciation? Okay, why am I not charging depreciation? Obviously, you should know by now that land does not depreciate. Okay, they appreciate. But I've told you under S36, where a situation where land can depreciate. Maybe you are using it for mining or for extractive industry. Okay, now let's look at illustration. The next illustration, non-monetary item. Okay, Palot, which has a functional currency in dollar, account for land or using revaluation model. Now, listen now. So this is revaluation model. Revaluation model and fair value model, they are the same thing. Just that revaluation applies to IAS 16 and fair value applies to IAS 40, but they are the same principle. Okay, but another difference is this: when you revalue an asset under IAS 16, you take it to other comprehensive income. But when you revalue an asset under IAS 40, you take it to profit or loss account. They are different things. I've shown you the difference between profit or loss account and income statement when we started with IAS 1, conceptual framework and the likes. Okay, so you might need to go and look at that again. So let me say that again. When you revalue an asset under IAS 16, you take it to other comprehensive income. But when you revalue an asset under fair value model in IAS 40, investment property, where do you take it to? You take it to profit or loss account. Why is this so? Maybe when we treat those standards in the future, I'm going to tell you, okay? But that's not what we are doing today. But you can see the interface between IAS 21, IAS 16, and IAS 40. That's why you need to understand those standards. So you don't expect the examiner to give you one question, one standard. You can test in a question, 2, 3, 4, 5 standards. That's why you need a deep understanding, okay? Now, we have been told that the functional and presentational currency of Palot is in dollars, and they account for land using revaluation model. Okay, so I move on. On 1st July 20x1, Palot purchased a land in another country for 1.2 million dinars. As at the year end, the fair value of the land was 1.5 million dinars. Okay, so what will I do here? You know, this is illustration. That's why you are not saying required, okay? You're going to say a question that will require us to require, okay? Okay, now, so what will I do? Because I have this information. So at the date of the transaction, I have to account for this. You know, don't forget we did accounting for individual transaction in foreign currency or in foreign currency, yes. So what will I do here now? I have to account for this. I will have to initially record the transaction using the spot exchange rate. So what will I need to do? So let me take you again. Okay. So if my functional currency is in dollars, how did they quote it? The quote was dinars to $1. Okay, so obviously my functional currency, which is the dollar, is stronger. And I will ask myself again, in which currency is the transaction denominated or designated? Is designated in the weaker currency. So I need to convert from that weaker currency to my own stronger currency. So in that case, what will I do? I will divide. Okay, if it was quoted in a stronger currency and you need to get to the weaker currency, you have to multiply. Okay, so but in this case, I have to divide. You can know this. You just know that the opposite of this is multiplication. Okay, in case you're having serious issue. If you don't understand the way I explain, don't worry yourself. Just call me. I'm going to further explain. Okay, so now what will I now do? I will now say, since I entered the transaction on this date, so I will now say 1.2 million divided by 4. I will have a figure, okay, which is 300,000. I will initially recognize that asset as 300,000. Okay, so because at year end, I have not made payment, okay, and land is a non-monetary item, okay. Normally, you don't restate or you don't retranslate, but because it is carried at fair value, okay, you are going to retranslate using the fair value at the date it was determined. Okay, so let's look at that. All right, so that means I will now say again how much they now said on 30th June, that's a year now, the fair value of the plot of land was 1.5 million dinar. Okay, so what will I now do? What is the exchange rate as at that day? It is 3. So I will now say 1.5 million divided by 3. What will I have? I will have 500,000. Don't forget, when I initially recorded, I have 300,000. Now the fair value now is 500,000. So I need to now revalue from 300,000 to 500,000. And I will now take the exchange difference into my other comprehensive income. Okay, so that is what is here. Everything I just said is here. Okay, let's go through it. Let's see whether what we have been saying is even correct. The land is initially recognized at cost. It should be translated into a functional currency using the exchange rate at the purchase date. So the land is initially measured at $300,000. Okay, so that's what we have just done. Land is not a monetary item, so its cost is not retranslated. However, in accordance with the revaluation model in IAS 16, the fair value has been determined. So this valuation is in dinar, and so must be translated into a functional currency using the exchange rate in place of the fair value it was determined. So this means the land will now be revalued to 500,000. That's what we have just done. Okay, so the increase in the carrying amount, which is the 500,000 minus 300,000, will now be reported as revaluation. Can you see now? As revaluation gain in other comprehensive income. Okay, for the year ended, and revaluation reserve will be included within the other components of equity. That's it. It's as simple as that. So that's what you are telling the examiner. And my people, let me tell you, we have ended IAS 21. It's as simple as that. Okay, the third aspect that we have not touched is translation of the financial statement of a foreign subsidiary. So when we start our group accounting, we are going to look at that, okay? But the very two other aspects, and IAS 21 can be tested, without the group accounting aspect. I think ICANN has done it severally, okay? I think I'm going to show you a question that ICANN also tested. So let's now look at this exercise, okay? Let's look at this exercise, okay? Exercise 2, butler, waiter, and attendant, okay? Okay, let's look at the A part of that question. An entity, butler, has a reporting date of 31 December and a functional currency of dollars. So I already have it in mind. My functional currency is in dollars. Okay. On 27 November 2006, butler buys goods from a Swedish supplier for 324,000 SWK. Okay. So now what will come to my mind? Don't forget, at the date of the transaction, the currency or the transaction must be translated into the functional currency. So if my functional currency, as per butler is concerned, is in dollars, okay, and I bought from a Swedish supplier, that's when you analyze question, okay, and I bought from a Swedish supplier for this amount. What does that tell me? I need to translate into my functional currency. So the question is this: on this date, 27 November, what is the exchange rate? You are asking the question. The question will supply you. What is my exchange rate? So then, and I need to find out, is my dollar stronger than the Swedish currency, okay, to determine whether I'm going to divide or to multiply before I can get my exchange rate. But I will continue with my question. You know, when you're in the exam hall and you are seeing things like this, you are even happy within yourself because you know what to do, because you understand the principle. Okay, can you see now the principle we have learned about 1 hour ago? That is what we are applying in all the question. It's as simple as that. No matter how big the question is, just have the principle at the back of your mind and you are applying the principle. Okay, then I'll move on again. On 19 January 2016, Butler pays the Swedish suppliers in full. Can you see? What was that supposed to mean? Cash settlement. So what is the I-21 is also calling me, and I will have to also retranslate on the settlement date, and that will now give rise to exchange difference, which could be loss or gain. Okay, I move on again. What the examiner tells me, the examiner just go ahead and give me the exchange rate, and I'll say required. Describe how the above transaction should be accounted for in the financial statement of Butler for the year ended 31st December 2006. Nobody is telling me that they are testing IS-21, but from the question I have seen, I am buying in a currency other than my own currency. So what does that tells me? That means they are testing IS-21. I don't need a soothsayer to come and tell me. I don't need to call a friend in the exam hall to come and tell me. I don't need to do 50-50, and I cannot walk away because I'm using cooperative money to write the exam and I must pass. Okay, I must be a chartered accountant. That's what you are telling yourself. Even in the exam, you know, sometimes you get to the exam and you go through all the questions and you now realize that what you have in your head is not sufficient to pass the exam in front of you. You cannot walk away. You just tell yourself, no, you this question, I'm going to solve it and I'm going to pass. Then you start, okay, in confidence. Even though everything in your head, when you look at your question, you cannot even supply all the answers that you're supposed to supply. But I've seen a lot of people like that, and they eventually pass. Okay, maybe they just have 52 or 55 or 53. It doesn't really matter. Nobody will write the mark on your certificate. Okay, you just score those scores and move on. Just go. So if you know, what's it called? If you know CR, then you can come and join FCA and lecture. Okay, and you don't even need to be in Lagos. You can also lecture online like we are doing now. Okay, so that's it. But you need to pass that exam first. Okay, so when I see this kind of question, I can solve it even without looking at the solution, because in the exam you will not see the solution. So you need to start practicing it now, and you cannot go to the toilet to check the solution. Okay, because we will catch you now. Allow. Okay, now and I will look at my exchange rate. It's very simple. Okay, so when I look at this exchange rate, okay, so which one is quoted in dollars? In one rather. Okay, dollars is quoted in one. Okay, so every $1 worth Swedish currency of maybe 11.15. Okay, so and I needed to convert to the stronger currency. I will ask myself again, which currency is transaction dominated? It's dominated in the weaker currency, and I need to convert the weaker currency into my into the stronger currency. I cannot multiply. It's not possible. I needed to divide. Okay, so I will now say at the date of that transaction, I will divide 324,000 divided by 11.15. Okay, I'm going to get a figure. So because I'm not using calculator now because of time, I may not be able to do that, but I'm sure you can do that on your own. So you have the figure. So because I buy goods from a Swedish supplier, so I'm buying goods, Abi. So since I'm buying, what will I do? I will debit purchases and I will credit what? Payables, okay, because I have not paid. Okay, on 19 December, I now paid according to the question. So I paid. I will now come again. I will look at this exchange rate. Okay, I will also go back to this figure. That is 324,000 divided by 10.93. I will also divide. Okay, so in that case, this one now tell me whether it's I will compare with the initial figure that I got, whether it's an exchange gain or loss. Okay, so if I'm buying, how much I was supposed to pay at that time? How much is the what now, or how much am I paying now? Okay, so it will either lead to exchange loss or exchange gain. So in that case, I will now recognize it in my profit or loss account. Okay, so that's that about that question. We're going to see the solutions shortly, but that's what I've just said. It's as simple as that. So this is B. The same thing applies to B. So let's look at B again. An entity, waiter, has a reporting date of 31, or should we look at the solution of that one before we look at B? Okay, let's quickly do that so that we are sure we're on the same page. Okay, all right, can you see now? Can you see now? Okay, that's what I just said. on the transaction date, what do? You have to divide. So we have 29,058. Can you see? You debit purchases and credit payables. That's as simple as that. Okay, when the cash settlement was made, you do the same translation. So if I was supposed to pay 29,058 as at the date the transaction occur, but I've eventually paid how much? 29,643 when I at the date of the cash settlement. That is a loss. I pay more than what I was supposed to pay, so it's a loss. Okay, so where will I charge the loss? I'll take it to my statement of profit or loss account. So that's it. As simple as that. You can, I-20 is just about conversion. Then take it to do proper journal entry. That's it. But you need to understand the principle. So let's look at the second part, B part of that question. Okay, let's see whether we can also apply our knowledge, okay, to solve the question. An entity, waiter, has a reporting date of 31st December and the dollar as its functional currency. Waiter borrows. Now, in this case, they are borrowing money, okay? Then something tells me, what is loan? This is loan, okay? Loan is a monetary item. Can you see now? So I will have to find out whether there is something like year-end balances here. Okay, waiter borrows in foreign currency of a crown. The loan of 120,000 K in crown, that's crown, was taken out on 1st January 2007. A repayment of 40K crown was made on 1st January 2007. The exchange rate as follows. Okay, required. Describe how the above should be accounted for in the financial statement of waiter for the year ended 31st December 2007. So what is the examiner really want me to do here? Okay, so I will first of all start by saying, when did the transaction occur? Okay, I took out this loan on 1st January 20x4. Then I will tell the examiner that expires 2021. Okay, all transactions denominated in foreign currency must be initially recorded by converting them using the spot exchange rate. Okay, so I'll now check the exchange rate again. What was the exchange rate as at that date? So this is 1K to $2. Now listen to me. Be with me now. Be with me. I have determined that my functional currency is in dollars. So when I look at the exchange rate, the currency that I'm borrowing from is stronger than my own currency. Can you see the point now? That's why you see 1K equals $2. Okay, so for every 1 crown, I will see $2. So that means the crown is bigger than my currency, or is stronger than my dollar currency. And I ask myself again, in which currency did I borrow? I borrowed in the stronger currency. Can you see that now? 120K crown, okay, 120,000 crown. I borrowed in the stronger currency, okay, and I needed to convert it to my weaker currency. So what will I do? I will multiply, okay. So I will simply say, on the date the transaction occur, okay, I will now say $2 multiplied by 120K crown. I will have 240, okay, 240,000. So that's what I will do. So when I multiply, I will move on again. Okay, they now said a repayment of 40K was made on 1st January. What was the exchange rate at that date? So if I received or borrowed 120K, I now paid 40K. Okay, I will now have to convert again. $3 multiplied by 40K. What will be the figure that I will get? You know, I will have a balance because I did not pay in full. I still have 80K crown left because loan is a monetary item. Okay, I will now have to retranslate the balance at the year end. That will now tell me whether I'm having a loss or a gain. So this is the exchange rate at the year end. So I will now have to use this at the year end. So that one will now determine. So let's look at what I've just explained in a what's it called now? In a solution. Okay, can you see now? All right. On 1st January 20x7, money was borrowed in crown. So this must be translated into the functional currency using the exchange rate. So what do? Can you see? You have to multiply. Okay, that's why you have the 240. So you debit your cash and you debit your loan. Then you now pay part of it. You also use that particular exchange rate again. Okay, so when you use that exchange, we have 120. So what do? You reduce your loan by 120, okay, because you are paid and you credit your cash, okay. So what now happens at the end? Because there is a balance, okay. So for you to do it, you can use it in a table like this. So what do? You simply say the loan you took in CRAM at the beginning of the year. Can you see 120? So what was the rate? Okay, so you multiply it, you convert it to dollars to have 1240, 240 rather. Now on 1st March 20x7, what happens again? You paid, so it will reduce the loan. So that's why you have this 80,000. Okay, so you use what's it called? Three three CRAM as the rate, so you now get 120. Okay, so how will I now know that I have what's it called, a loss or a gain? So if I, this is my balance that is remaining after paying 40,000. I will now use the exchange rate at that day, okay, at the year end. That's as at December 31, 20x7. So I have 280. What it simply means is this. Now listen, how do I know now? So as at the year end, the balance of the loan that I'm yet to pay is 280. But when I pay here, when I pay, when I borrow 240 in dollars and I have paid 120. Okay, so if I borrow 240 and I have paid 120, how much is remaining? 120 is remaining. Okay, so let me say that again. I borrowed $120. I have paid I borrowed $240. Okay, and I have paid $120. How much is remaining? $120 is remaining in dollars. So when I now convert the balance in CRAM to what is remaining in dollars as at the year end, it was 280. Meanwhile, in the recent, as at this date, $120 was remaining. This is just a coincidence, right? Okay, $120 was remaining. So if I remove the $120 that was supposed to pay, that it was remaining, but it now worth $280 after the year end. So the difference between 120 and 280 is 160. So this is an exchange loss. So I'll take it to my profit or loss account immediately, and I will increase the value of my loan. Okay, so that's what you are seeing there. All right, so that's very simple, right? Okay, so let's look at the last part of that question. Let's look at the last part of that question. I think we have one more. Okay. Now, the C part of the question. An entity, attendant, has a reporting date of 31 July, December, has a reporting date of 31 December, and has the dollar as a functional currency. Attendant purchased a plot of land overseas on 1st March 20x10. The entity paid for the land in the currency of Rand. The purchase cost of the land as our 1st March was 60 Rand or 60 Rand. The value of the land at the reporting date was 80 Rand. Exchange rate were as follows. Require. Describe how the above transaction should be accounted for in the financial statement of attendance for the year ended 31st December 20x0. If the land is measured at cost and the fair value. Okay, so I will ask myself, what is my functional currency? Okay, this my functional currency is in dollars. Okay, all right. So, and I have a reporting date of 31st December. All right. Now, I purchased a land on 1st January 20x0. Okay, and I paid how much in Rand. Okay, that's fine. So on the date of the transaction, which is 1st March 20x0, what is the exchange rate? 8 Rands to $1, and my functional currency is dollar. So that means my dollar is stronger than the Rand. I will now ask again, in which currency is the transaction denominated? It's denominated in Rand. So when I buy on 1st March 20x20, it was 60 Rand. 60,000 Rand. So what will I do? I will simply say 60,000 Rand divided by 8. I'll get a figure. Okay. Now, so when I do that, what happens? Now, they now say the value of the land at the reporting date is 80,000. So when I'm using cost model, don't forget, because land is a non-monetary item, I will not retranslate. So when I do my 60,000 RLAN divided by 8, the figure I got, I will continue to carry it like that. But when I'm using revaluation model, that means I'm going to redivide this 80,000, the date the fair value was determined. I will now divide it by 10. So what will I, after I've done my initial recognition, don't forget, I will now divide this by 10 again. Okay, so the difference between that figure and this figure will now be my exchange revaluation difference. Okay, so that's very simple. That's what that question is saying. So let me look at that. Okay, can you see now? The asset is initially recognized and it should be translated into the functional currency. Can you see now? So can you see 60,000 divided by 8? So you have 75. So since land is not a monetary item, so you don't retranslate and instead on that cost model, so it will remain at $7,500. It's as simple as that. Now the second part, because it's held at fair value, so what do? You now do 80,000 divided by 10. Can you see the exchange rate at the year end? So you have 8,000. So there is an increase between the initial translation, which is 75, and the new 8,000. So you now credit this, you debit the asset with 500. You increase it to 8,000 by 500. Okay. Now if land is held under PPE, it will take it to profit or loss account. If it is held under a 16, you now take it to OCI because it's a gain. Can you see? It's very simple. Okay, it's very, very simple. So let's look at this last exercise. In fact, if I don't take you through this exercise, my conscience will not allow me to rest. Okay, so I need to show you. This is an ECAM past question, and this is where you are going to see how to use average rate. I told you about average rate the other time. So most times you use average rate when it comes to interest on loan. The loan we dealt with the other time was just the loan itself, not the interest. But we're going to see interest on loan on this question. Or want to go and sleep? No, you cannot go and sleep now. So let's look at this question now. Okay, it's very simple. It's very simple. Miko is a major property developer which buys land for construction of housing. Miko took out a foreign currency loan of 5 million dirham at fixed interest rate of 8% on May 1, 2014. The interest rate is paid at the end of each year. This is key. The interest rate is paid at the end of each year. The loan will be repaid after 2 years on April 30, 2016. That means the whole principal will be paid after 2 years, but the loan is paid at the end of each year. Okay, the interest rate is the current market rate, similar to 2-year fixed interest, loan. Okay, now Miko has a financial year end on April 30, 2015, and the average currency rate for the year is not materially different from the actual rate. So these are the exchange rates. Average rate for the year ended 30th April was 5.6. Required. Advise Miko on how to account for loan and interest in the financial statement for the year ended April 30th, 2015. How will I know that they are testing IAS 21? Okay, I just see the examiner is saying I should advise how will they treat the loan. So here I'm confused. Is it financial instrument? Are they talking about financial assets? I don't know. Or financial liability? I will not know. But how will I know that they are testing IAS 21? Okay, they already said I took out a loan in foreign currency, in dirham. Okay, meanwhile my own functional currency is in naira. Can you see that now? Okay, so going abroad. I told you earlier, that's why my introduction to every lecture is key. Okay, is key. I already said earlier that anytime you deal with transaction other than the functional currency or the national currency of your country, then IAS 21 will apply. So going to take out a loan in a foreign currency, okay, so IAS 21 will apply. So what will I do? So at the date of the transaction, I'm going to convert that 5 million dirham into my functional currency. So if my functional currency is 1 naira, that means my currency is stronger, okay? And dirham is what? Is the weaker currency. Then I will ask myself, in which currency did I borrow money? I borrow in 5 million dirham, Okay, so I'll now say 5 million divided by, when did I borrow the money? Okay, let me look at the date so that it will affect, to influence our, what's it called? The exchange rate we are going to use. Okay, we borrowed the money May 1, 2024. So I'll say 5 million divided by 5. Okay, what will I have? I think I will have 1 million. So I will record that loan immediately. So how will I record it? Credit loan and debit cash, debit cash and credit loan, because I'm collecting that loan. Okay, so what will I do again? I will now move to my interest. Okay, they said 8% interest, so I will calculate 8% of that interest on the loan. Okay, so I have to calculate the 8%, and the examiner already told me that the loan will be repaid after, sorry, that's the loan, right? But the interest rate will be paid at the end of each year. So the question now is this: how much is my, okay, can you see now? This is what I've just done. Okay, that's it. That's the first thing you need to do. We are only doing 4 things in this question. No matter, that's all. Just 4 things. Convert the loan at the spot rate, using the spot rate. That's how we got the 1 million. Okay, so you now calculate the interest again. So 8% of 5 million is going to give me 400,000. Okay, and in this case I will now use the average rate, because I was already told that the average rate for the year ended is April 31, 2015. Okay, because I borrowed at the beginning of the accounting year, and the interest rate is paid at the end of each year. So as at the time I'm paying, I'm going to convert using the exchange average rate at the end of the year. So at the end, I have 5.6. So I will now say 400 divided by 5.6. I will have a figure. I will now recognize it as an expense in my financial statement. So it will increase the carrying amount of my liability. Okay, so that's what you are seeing here. Can you see now? Debit statement of profit or loss and debit my finance cost. So it will increase the carrying amount of my liability. Now, when I now pay the interest at the year end, okay, you know, I have to pay at the each year, at the end of each year. Okay, so I'm going to pay 400,000 in each year, because that's the exchange rate. So I will now look at the what's the exchange rate on payments now. Can you see now? In the first year, okay, because that interest is per year. Interest rate is per year. So I'll pay 400,000 now, 400,000 the other day. So when I'm paying the first one, I have 6 here. So I'll now say 400,000 divided by 6. Okay. So when I do that, I have 666, 667. Okay. So you remember, I've already credited my finance cost. If you remember when I did what's it called here? Okay. Can you see now? I've already debited my finance cost and I credit my loan. So when I now reconvert, that is at the year end. That same, you know, I use the average rate, right? So that same year end I'm now paying. So that's the interest rate is now 6. So what has happened? So the finance cost payable will now be debited with this amount. Okay. Then I will credit my bank. This is the actual money that is going out. Can you see the point now? Because I've already credited my finance cost payable here. So I will now have to nil it off. Okay. I will now credit my bank. This is money that is going on. So I was supposed to pay this, but I will eventually pay this, which is lower. So I have a gain. I will now recognize it in my profit or loss account. So that's the third thing I need to do. And the last thing that I need to do is at the year end, because what's it called? Land is a non-monetary item. Okay, it's a non-monetary item. So what will I now do is this: the liability will now be you know, what's it called? Is it land? No, it's the loan rather. Sorry, it's a loan. So since it's a loan, it's a monetary item. Okay, so I will now have to retranslate, because as per S21, you need to retranslate. So if I have 5 million at the end of the, you know, at the beginning of the year when I took it, when I recognized it, I recognized 1 million naira. Okay, I will now look at the exchange rate at the year end, because I've not paid. So it is 6. I will retranslate again. So when I retranslate again, I have 8333. Okay, and I've already recognized 1 million. So I need to write it down. So here, because the liability, right? So I'll now debit my loan with this amount, and I will now credit exchange gain, because as at the beginning of the year, I have a liability of 1 million. But as at the end of the year, that liability what probably because Jiran has now appreciated or whatever. Okay, so I have a 833. Okay, so I have to write it down, and the difference will now be recognized in my profit or loss account as a credit, and that is the end of IAS 21. Okay, that's the end of IAS 21. You can look at criticism of IAS 21. I've actually explained some of those items, some of those criticisms when I was explaining. So you can look at that. Okay, now, so that's the end of IAS 21. And you are okay. So this is a summary. Can you see now? It's in a tabular form, there is in a diagrammatic form there. Okay, so you can go through them, all right, and you have some review questions that you can lay your hands on. It's very simple. I'm very sure by the time you lay your hands on those review questions, you will be very, very happy. So you have about 2 or 3 questions there. Okay, yeah, SPA is there too. So you have about 2 or 3 questions in total. So you can go through them, all right, and if you have questions, you can drop it on the chat button, or you can call or chat after the class or any other time you may deem fit. I think we still have about 30 minutes. All right, so let's quickly look at substance over form. Okay, or are you tired? Don't be tired. Okay, you can stretch your leg. So while you stretch your leg, let me take water. Okay, substance over form principle. Okay, now we are ready, right? Okay, so let's continue. Yeah, we still have about 30 minutes, so let's deal with substance over form so we know we are dealing with some other thing in the next class. Okay. What do you mean by substance over form? Now let me tell you this. You won't see this in your syllabus. Yeah, it's not expressly written in the syllabus. And I'm very sure it's not even in ICANN Pack. Okay. In both ACCA and ICANN, it's not there. But it's a subject or it's a principle that they have been testing diet out. It's either they test it directly as a topic, okay, or it's embedded in some of the questions you are solving. You may not know, but probably after this class or in the course of explaining, you will now understand. Now, what do we mean by substance? What do we mean by form? That's what we are looking out for. Okay. Now, let me demonstrate with this example. I'm not really too sure whether when we started the class on our conceptual framework lights, whether I actually mentioned this. Okay. Now, your company bought a transformer, and that transformer worth 700 million naira. Okay. So you bought a transformer probably as part of your corporate social responsibility. So the transformer was, installed in the front of your company. You are using the transformer. Some of the community where your company is located are also using the transformer. Okay, and in your accounting policy, you already stated that any asset that worth 1 million naira should be capitalized. Okay, any item that you bought that worth 1 million naira should be capitalized as an asset. All right, and you now bought a transformer that worth 700 million. Okay, the question now is this: can you recognize that transformer as an asset? Okay, now because you bought it, most likely the receipt was written in your company's name. Number two, because you bought it and you are using the assets, okay, even though your community is also using the assets. That's number two. Then number three, the amount or the cost of that asset is actually more than the benchmark or the threshold for you to capitalize an asset. So you might be tempted to say we can go ahead and capitalize the asset or recognize it as an asset in your books, and you now start to depreciate as the case may be. Now listen to me. In that case, what we call substance over form okay, we have to play a role. So what do we now mean by substance over form? Substance simply means the economic reality. Okay. Now, in the scenario that I just gave now, the economic reality is this. Even though legally you are the one that bought the transformer, the receipt of the transformer was written in your company's name. But in the real sense of it, you don't control the asset. Don't forget, when we started, we said before you can recognize an asset, you have to exercise control. And control simply means your ability to gain economic benefit from the asset. And you can also restrict people from gaining the same economic benefit. So in that case, if that is the case, so the substance or the economic reality is that you don't control the transformer. And I can even tell you that right from the day that you bring that transformer to your premises or wherever to be installed, the PACM people will tell you that they are the real owner. You just help them to buy it. So in that case, substance will prevail over form. So that is substance over form. So in everything we do, okay, substance, which is the economic reality. What is really the economic reality? Okay, it has to prevail. Let me give you another example. I don't want to be reading what is here. I'm just trying to explain. So when you read it, you understand. Okay, now let me give you another example. Let me use an airline as an example. Arik here, for example, has an airplane, Boeing 737. They bought the airplane in their name. That's Arik. Okay. Now, in a finance lease arrangement, Arik now lists out Boeing 737 to Airpeace. Okay. They list it out. But let me quickly explain what finance lease is all about. Finance lease is, when a transaction is done under finance lease, it means the lessee controls the asset. All the risk and reward flows to the lessee. The economic benefit for that asset is with the lessee. And the asset is being leased, the term of the lease is significantly higher. It's very significant to the lease term, is very significant to the economic life of that asset. For example, if the economic life of that asset is 50 years, and you now lease it for 48 years, so it's quite significant. So you say that transaction is a finance lease, okay? So in that scenario, Arik here, even though he's the owner of the asset, okay, now he has now listed out to Airpeace Nigeria under a finance lease. Naturally, if you want to look at the legal form, Arik should recognize that asset in their books, but no, because in the real sense of it, it is what's it called? Airpeace that controls the asset. It is Airpeace that all the economic benefit of the asset is flowing to. So what substance over form principle is now saying is this: when preparing the account, accountant must consider the substance of the transaction rather than their legal form, okay, which is the ownership. So that means in this case, you disregard ownership. So ownership sometimes does not necessarily mean you are going to recognize the asset in the financial statement. You are going to look at the substance of the transaction. What is the economic reality? Look at what's it called now? A company that sold goods to a customer. Meanwhile, the goods still remain in the custody of the company. The goods has not passed to the customer, and they went ahead to recognize revenue. No, it's not correct, because in substance, in the economic sense, the company still has control over the inventory. Even though the customer might have paid, you don't recognize revenue. You still recognize a liability. That's the meaning. That's the essence. And I'm sure you might have come across this in maybe your financial reporting or even in corporate reporting, but nobody is telling you that it's actually substance over form. But that's what we have been doing, okay? So that's why I said it's not expressly stated in the syllabus, but they keep testing it. It's either they test this directly, I'll say it's in this same question, even I can question directly, or when you prepare your group accounting, your cash flow statement, they are coming up. Okay, look at what they call it now, agency company. Okay, like an airline agent now, that they are selling tickets on behalf of the airline. All the money they are getting from ticket sales, is not their revenue. If they should go ahead and recognize those money, that means they are overstating their revenue, and that's window dressing. But because the economic reality is that the ticket sales, they are going to remit it to the real owner. The only thing they can recognize as their revenue is the commission on tickets sold. That is substance over form. But mind you, at every point in time, the substance of a transaction should be the same with the legal form. But in some cases, the substance of transaction and its legal form might not be the same. In that case, whenever the substance of a transaction and the form of a transaction are not the same, the substance will prevail. So that's what they call it. That's why they call it substance over form. That's everything that is there. And those are some of the examples. I've said it, so you can read it. Okay. So let me now take you through features which may indicate that substance of a transaction differs from its legal form. Number one, where assets are sold at a price that are greater or less than their fair values, substance is applied. Sometimes it might be a secure loan. Okay, so if the fair value of a transaction is 5 million naira and I want to sell it to you, why am I selling it at an amount higher or lower? If not, if you are my related party, I might sell it at an amount lower to you. Something I'm supposed to sell at 5 million, but because you have influence over me. So we are still going to look at IS 24, related party transactions or related party disclosures. Okay. Now, so why am I selling lower? Probably because you are my related party and I need to disclose it. That means the transaction, the substance of that transaction differs from its economic reality. Okay, a transaction or an asset worth 5 million, but I'm selling it to you at 8 million. Why? Why? Why am I selling it? It may be a secure loan. That's what they are saying. Okay, I'm paying higher to you to use the asset. Most likely, the difference between the 5 million and the 8 million I'm paying, the difference, that 3 million might be a finance cost. It might be a loan. So we need to apply substance over cost. So that in that case, I will not record a sale. Rather, I will record a liability. That's the meaning. Okay, when an asset is listed out on finance list, I've explained that already. Okay, then you also look at consolidation. In consolidation, okay, the legal reality or the legal whatever is that two companies are coming together. So why are we now calling them one? But the reality is that they are now one. Okay, that's why in consolidation, despite the fact that parent owns 51% of the subsidiary, the entire subsidiary is consolidated. Okay, so you can go ahead and read all those ones. I've actually explained them. Okay, so when you are now applying substance over form, you ask yourself, does this make economic sense? Is it just selling a property for less than the market value? Why am I doing that? Okay, although some companies might need money at all costs, that's why they are doing that. So in that case, they need to disclose. Okay, with what I know about business, does it make commercial sense? E.g., why would a financial institution purchase a factory that it will not use and then plans to resell it to the previous owner? Is that not sales and lease back? Okay, that's the reasons. That's the substance. Is it not? It looks like sales and lease back. Okay, so why am I selling and I will not later sell it? Resell to the owner. Why can't I treat it as sales and lease back instead of recording a disposal of assets? Okay. Which party owes the significant risk and reward? Okay, I explained this earlier. I have sold an inventory. Meanwhile, I still remain in my cost. It happens in so many companies. That's why external auditors, they do what we call what do they call it? An inventory count. And you see companies trying to hide all those third-party stock. Why? Because they don't want external auditors to see them. Because most of those stocks that you said you have sold, you have not actually sold them. And you have recognized it within your revenue. Okay? That's why substance we have to prevail. All right? So those are the points you need to understand when it comes to substance over form principle. Okay? So this is a question here. Now, look at this A part of the question. An important aspect of the International Reporting Standard Board framework for preparation and presentation of financial statements that transactions should be recorded on the basis of their substance over their form. Required, explain why it is important that financial statement should reflect the substance of the underlying transaction and describe the features that may indicate that substance of the transaction may differ from its legal form. My class, I'm sure you can do this question, right? So why do you think it is important for the financial statement to reflect the substance of an transaction? Why? Why? You should be able to do that, okay? Otherwise, users of financial statement will be misled. Okay, transactions that have not taken place, they said it has taken place, just like all those inventory, whatever I was talking about the other time. Or what are the features that will indicate that the substance of the transaction, like I said, they should be the same, but there are cases where they can differ. For example, an asset was sold below or above its fair value. Okay, so those are those situations where the substance of the transaction may differ from its legal form. Okay, I think the answer is in your notes, so you can read further. Now let's look at this question. This is the calculation part of the question. Why do activities include the production of manufacturing products which take a long time before they are ready to retail? Detail of such products are that on 1st April 2009, it had a cost of 5 million and had a fair value of 7 million. The product will not be ready for retail sale until 31st March 20x2. On 1st April 2009, Wadu entered into an agreement to sell the product to Easy Finance for 6 million. The agreement gave Wadu the right to repurchase the product anytime up to 31st March 2012 at a fixed price of 7.9 million. At which date Wadu expected that the product to retail for 10 million. Okay, the compound interest Wadu would have to pay on a 3-year loan of 6 million would be year 1, year 2, and year 3. The interest is equivalent to the return required by Easy Finance. Okay, assuming the above figures prove to be accurate, prepare extract from the income statement of Wadu for 3 years to 31st March 2012 in respect to the above transaction. High, reflecting the legal form of the transaction, and 2, reflecting the substance of the transaction. C, comment on the effect of the two treatments have on income statement and the statement of financial position, and how this may affect the assessment of Wadu's performance. Okay, so let's look at that. So the examiner is saying, if you look at here, he's saying we should prepare income statement. So when you see that, they are only telling us, look at the revenue, look at the cost of sales, then look at your finance cost and get your gross profit, then look at your finance cost and get your net profit. That's all. Okay, so the question now is, how do we now classify it into a legal form and the economic reality? Okay, so if you look at that question, okay, let's look at the question again. If you look at this question, okay, they said, what do activity includes production, blah, 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 okay. Now, details of sub products are on 1st April. It had a cost of 5 million and a fair value of 7.5. Okay, and the product will not be ready until this. No, on 1st April, Wadu now entered into an agreement to sell a product to Easy Finance for 6 million. We are selling a product to Easy Finance for 6 million, and the agreement gave Wadu the right to repurchase. Can you see that? They need to repurchase with a fixed price of this, and they will have to retail for this. Okay, so now at one point it's looking like sales and repurchase. At another point is looking like normal sales. So normal sales is the legal form. In that case, you will not charge the finance cost. But in the recent, it's not a sale because they are going to buy it again and retail it at 10 million. And they now give us the what's it called? The interest that was supposed to be paid on that loan. Okay. So how do we now do that? So all you need to do, okay, I think the first question is this. Can you see the features that may indicate the substance of a transaction when controls of an asset differs from ownership? Can you remember when I talked about ARIC and earpiece? Okay, when assets are sold at prices that are greater or lesser than their fair values. Okay, when you use the use of options as part of agreement. What's option? That means the person may return it, may delay it, or when you have options in your agreement. Okay, or warranty. All right. Now, when there are a series of linked transactions, okay, so the transactions, for example, in leases, you can have a contract that has leases and rent. Okay, so how do you do that? Okay, now in the B part of the question, all you need to do is you look at the legal form, because the examiner said you should calculate up to 31st March 2012. So what happens? That means you pick it for each year. So let's assume it's the same, which is not really a sale. That is the legal form. Okay. So we look at revenue in the first year. Okay, 6,000. So how do we get this 6,000? Okay, it's there in the question. Okay. So I have to scroll up so that I can show you in case you are not seeing it. Because you see now, they said they will have to repay at 6 million. Okay. That is and at which value is expected to it's expected that the product will be retailed at 10 as at this date. Okay, can you see now? And they enter the agreement, okay, on first, what's it called? 1st April 2009 to sell the product to Easy Finance at 6 million. Okay, so that's where you have that. And the cost of sales, okay, we have to be the 5 million as at that date. Okay, so that's what you have there. Okay. Okay, so that's how you have this cost of sales and that finance that they need to repay. That's what you have here. So you add everything together and there will not be any finance cost because we are treating it as sales, which is not really the case. And you have your net profit to be this figure. Now, let's now treat it the way it's supposed to be. So if I'm treating it the way it's supposed to be, in my year one, there will be revenue and year two. So I will only record that 10,000 at the end, okay, in 2012. Then the cost of sales was supposed to occur at that year. So I will now look at my finance costs, which are the year one, year two that they listed before I now get my net profit. So if you look at it, my overall profit is the same in my net, okay? It will always be the same, okay? But the problem is that when I treat it as legal form, I did not recognize finance income, okay? But here, I'm recognizing finance income. And it's also, finance cost rather, finance cost. And it's also having impact on the profit I reported in year one. Okay, I reported net profit of 1,000 in year one. Meanwhile, I should have reported a negative balance of 600,000 in year one. Okay, and a negative balance of 660 in year two before I now recognize a profit in year three. Can you see now? So that is the problem. So if a user of financial statement is seeing the legal form, okay, it's going to mislead them because here it appears that finance cost does not exist. Meanwhile, it actually exists. Okay, and I was able to report profit here. Okay, that is the C part of the question that is asking you to make comments. That's the comment. You have to tell the examiner. So that's why it's important to always reflect the substance of a transaction. So if you see this now, it can be seen from the above that the two treatments have no effect on the total net profit. Can you see that now? On the income. However, the profit reported in different the profit is reported in different periods, okay, and the cost classifications are also different. So in effect, the legal form creates some element of profit smoothing, okay, because we're able to report profit when we're supposed to record loss. Why? Because we didn't treat it as finance loss and completely hide the finance cost. That's what we explain to the examiner, and that's the comment that the examiner wants you to do. Okay, so you have one assignment there. okay, you can go ahead and solve that assignment. If you're having issues, let me know. Okay, so that brings us to the end of substance over form, and we successfully looked at IAS 21, the effect of the effect of changes in foreign exchange currency, foreign exchange rates. Okay, let me see if I have a question. If I have a question here, okay, what is IAS 21 position when average rate fluctuated significantly? Okay, if average rate fluctuates significantly, okay, there is nowhere in IAS 21 that it was expressly stated. What IAS 21 actually said was use the average rate provided it does not fluctuate significantly. Okay, so technically it means that if it fluctuates significantly, you are going to use the spot rate. That's the mean. Okay, and when I was explaining earlier, I said you either use the spot rate when you want to initially record your transaction, or you use the average rate provided it does not change significantly. Okay, but I also quick to mention the average rate we always apply on interest rate. Why? Because interest is paid over an average period of time. It's paid over a period of time. So I think it's suitable or it's appropriate to use average rate. Okay, but in case the average rate is now fluctuating significantly, obviously you are going to use the spot exchange rate. Yeah, that's fine. That's a very brilliant question. So I want to believe there is no other question for me. I couldn't believe we could do this in 2 hours. That's fantastic. That's why I said even this online is we are covering the syllabus like oh my god, that's brilliant. Okay, so I'm confident we will touch. In fact, when I was looking at the curriculum, I was like, I'm at the Paris standard. Okay, we're almost finishing all the standards. So that means by third week we should finish all the standards. So we have 5 good weeks to look at group accounting and what's it called, cash flow. That's nice. That's brilliant. So thank you for your time. No more question for me. All right. So we're going to see tomorrow by God's grace. Enjoy your evening. God bless you.